Hello and welcome to the Week 1 video review for Understanding Language, Learning and Teaching, brought to you by the British Council and the University of Southampton. In this video review, I want to recap on some of the main topics that we've been discussing this week. I'll mention a few of the interesting conversations that I've seen and try to answer a few of the questions on this step. Right, the step with the most comments on it so far is the introductory step 1.5. How do you use language in your life? Over 400 people have told us about their uses of different languages in their everyday lives, and it's fascinating to see the range of languages that you use and the extent to which you use them. It's also great to see so many people commenting, because we truly believe that the real value of this course is the opportunity to interact with other people. So I do encourage you to keep commenting, keep replying to other people's comments, challenge the ideas in our materials, challenge politely the ideas that others put forward, share links to other resources that build on some of the ideas that we mention. And in that way, you'll get so much more out of this course than if you just whiz through the texts and the videos that we provide. So after introducing yourselves, you've plunged into some very interesting conversations about the nature of language and meaning. The section on implied meaning, I always find a lot of fun because of the examples that people share that are sometimes quite humorous. On a more serious note, I think the issue of implied meaning helps to illustrate how understanding or knowing a language is as much to do with being familiar with the context in which language is used and the culture in which it's used, as it is to do with formally learning words, dictionary definitions of words and grammatical rules. Shaquille suggests that the animal, a donkey, might be considered unwise in some cultures, but hard-working in others. I like this example because I can imagine a context where somebody might use a donkey as a way of giving a compliment by saying, he's a donkey, meaning he's hardworking. But I can imagine that being understood as an insult by somebody from a different culture. Shaquille is waiting for suggestions as to how teachers can help learners with this. How can we raise awareness that the meaning of the words we use isn't always the meaning that you see in the dictionary? How do we teach implied meaning? You can find his question, pinned to the top of the list of comments on this step, so perhaps some of you could offer suggestions. Elsewhere, we've established that most of you believe motivation to be the most important factor in learning a second language. This is nicely summed up by Olga. And I quote, "If you have motivation to learn a language, nothing can stop you. If you don't, nothing can help you." What do you think of that? There have been some very interesting conversations about motivation. I've pinned one on this step and linked it to others, including a series of 3 posts, quite lengthy posts, but very interesting ones from Martin about participating in a model UN conference. His 3rd post and the follow-up from our mentor Josh about directed motivational currents might be particularly interesting if you're thinking, yes, this is great, but how do we sustain that increased motivation when the conference is over? It would be good to see some more ideas on that if anyone has anything to contribute. And I've promised Panayota I'd pick up on her question on identifying what's hard and easy when learning a language. I think Panayota's suggestion that a teacher can gain this knowledge with experience is true. I always learn far more from my learners than they learn from me, I think. But there are also things you can learn in preparation for teaching. So there are certain things that learners from specific language backgrounds will find more difficult than others. And you can predict some of those by learning a little bit about their languages, even if you don't speak them yourself. But in our materials this week, we've introduced some recent research that's been carried out at Southampton to try to establish whether there are certain aspects of language that are inherently easier or harder for everyone, regardless of which languages you know and which languages you're learning. In step 1.9, we introduced the Bottleneck Hypothesis, and this is an attempt to model and explain the observation that those little grammatical endings, little parts of words that carry grammatical meaning, are generally more difficult to acquire than other aspects of language. So it might be relatively easy to learn the meaning of a new word, a content word such as a verb like dance, but it's relatively more difficult to understand the difference between danced and dances, for example. So the bottleneck, Stephen, I hope this will help. You've asked for a simple explanation of it. The bottleneck is like the place in a road where the road narrows and some of the vehicles get slowed down and a bit stuck for a while others whiz through a bit faster. So this is where your language knowledge, parts of your language knowledge come gushing out. You can recognise the vocabulary you've learned, but other things that you've learned take a little longer to process, a little longer to become embedded so that you can use them. So I hope that helps. It's not easy to understand, and I would say at this point we've not introduced this because it's a major hypothesis in language learning that we expect everybody to know about. It is a relatively new idea, and as such we've put it there as a starting point for discussion. Feel free to challenge it, to tell us if it doesn't make sense to you, or if you think there are better theories and hypotheses out there. Moving on, in step 1.13 we mentioned the controversial topic of learning styles. Now I know several people on this step have asked for tools for establishing which type of learner you are, or which type of learner your students are. And there are a number of tools available on the internet, but their use is controversial, and I'm rather hesitant to suggest one. I think if you're interested enough, you can find them, try them out, tell us what you think, and we can discuss it further in the comments. Personally, I'm not convinced of the need for questionnaires and things to find out what type of learner all your students are. I think the pinned comment on step 1.13 from Kate echoes how I feel about learning styles, and other people, including Carla, Haruka, Claudia, have said kind of similar things. Basically, expect that people in your class will want to learn in different ways. They'll have different preferences, different strengths and weaknesses, and therefore, as a teacher, you should be providing a good mix of activities. Recycle the language that you're teaching through different activities that will appeal to different people with different learning preferences, rather than getting too hung up on identifying, which learner prefers to learn in which way, because it's controversial. Anyway, moving on to week 2 next week. Week 2 is specifically about classroom teaching and learning, so perhaps we can take some of these ideas further with specific suggestions for activities to engage people who learn in different ways next week, as we're talking about the different types of classroom and different approaches to learning and teaching in the classroom. So I look forward to lots more interaction with you all next week. Keep commenting, keep contributing. See you soon.